Okay, welcome to the next professional series on practitioner researchers. So what we're looking at is practitioners doing research or practitioners looking to better understand how to consume research. This is the third of our series, and the series is now operating also in conjunction with EMCC Global and their Centre for Excellence in Research. And we'll give you a link to their website and their resources as well at the end of this process. I'm absolutely thrilled today to be inviting Celiane Camargo-Borges and Sheila McNamee to be presenting. In particular, the work they've been doing on design thinking and social construction, which I think is of enormous value to practitioners, particularly where we're thinking about collaborative approaches to research. So welcome to you both. Perhaps you'd just like to introduce yourself. Sheila, do you want to go first?
Okay. Thanks, David. It's great to be here and very excited to talk about our book and its meaningfulness for practitioners. I am a retired professor of communication at the University of New Hampshire, and I am a founder and the vice president of the Taos Institute, which is a global community designed to bring practitioners and scholars together around the topic of relational approaches and social construction. Celiane?
Yeah, so my name is Celiane, and I'm also part of the Taos Institute and live in the Netherlands, where I'm a practitioner and researcher working with creative, innovative, and collaborative approaches on research, and very excited to be here today talking about our book.
Brilliant, thanks. Okay, can we start by just exploring the concept of knowledge as you see it, because it's very important in terms of how this approach to research is conceptualized.
Yeah, I'll give a start to it, and Celiane, you can certainly fill in the blanks. But, traditionally we think about knowledge as something that's out there and needs to be discovered. And how do we discover it? Well, research is the way of discovering it. And so that implies if it's already there, there's a huge emphasis on needing to have the right question, the right method, the right analysis, the right context, the right group. There's another way of thinking about knowledge, and that is what we embrace, which is that knowledge is to be discovered. It's to be created collaboratively, that we create knowledge in what we do with one another. And that has remarkably distinct notions about research, because now those with whom we are, in former traditional research, those who would be our subjects are now our participants or our co-researchers. And there's much more of an emphasis on multiple forms of questions, not the right question, not the right method. And I think Celiane and I are so interested in this area because we work with so many students at all levels who are doing fantastic work in their practice and their lives. And once they put the word research to their own work, they freeze, because research seems, so important and so heavy, and they have to have the right question and the right method. And so trying to get the message out that there are different questions to ask, and the questions we ask bring forth the answers we get. And so it's always a process of constructing knowledge, and that's the main distinction. Celiane, do you want to add to that?
Yeah. And then when we understand that knowledge is something we construct together in our relationships, research becomes something that has a completely different meaning. Now research is doing with people, and by doing with people in context, you start participating with them. So it's not a universal way of doing with this universal methodology, but depending on where you are and with whom you are, you might co-create different methodologies. You might co-create different paths to go on and to create this knowledge in context.
That's fascinating, because it just goes so close to thinking about practitioners being able to actually collaborate with other practitioners, with their clients, and really relating it to the particular context in which they're working. So, but particular cultural or historical or political contexts, which is absolutely fascinating. As you say, it means they are participants or co-researchers. They're not the object or the subject of a research in an external sort of way.
Right. And also it means that the practitioners themselves are not the experts. So, there's this, I think, liberating notion, when people are training to become a professional, whatever that professional context is, there's always the sense of, am I doing it right? Is this the right way of doing it? And then when meeting clients, whether it's in therapy or as an educator or a social worker, what have you, is this the right question to ask? Is this the right way to be? And so again, to repeat myself, I think it's liberating for practitioners to realize that in collaborating with their clients and collaborating with their peers, there's much more fluidity and ability to bring the resources that they themselves already have developed over the course of their lives to the process of research or their work, whichever it is. And it's just, it takes away that expectation of being the all-knowing expert.
That means it changes, in fact, the role of the researcher, doesn't it? The role of the researcher is very different. They're acting with others as potential change agents.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. And also I would say, David, with this research changing, we start looking much more in the process or paying attention to the process of doing this research together and trusting in this experimentation that the results will emerge as the process goes. So in traditional research, sometimes we have hypotheses. And from the beginning, you have to discover if this is the case or not. And you focus so much on those hypotheses that you don't see the process emerging. And when the process is emerging, there are many richness that might be the way to go. And if you are present to this process with your research participants, you have much more chances to be successful in the knowledge and the action you are creating.
Yeah. And I think it also overcomes some of the frustrations that practitioners often feel when they do collaborate on research projects, particularly with academia. They kind of feel their sense of meaning of what they're trying to do gets changed and changed and changed and narrowed and narrowed and narrowed until they end up researching a question that really doesn't appeal to them anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another, I think, key idea to insert here is that from our perspective, we see research as future forming as opposed to, again, that metaphor of discovery, what's already there and existing. This is creating the future. And so if research is future forming, there's so many implications. For example, as Celiane was pointing out, we're paying attention to the process and how it unfolds over time. And you may be switching directions and changing questions. And that doesn't mean you're a bad researcher. I mean, that means actually you are being attentive to the set of relations that are being created in your work. And it also has implications for how we think about our results. The questions we ask bring forth the answers that we get. And so our results are not the definitive answer, that there are multiple answers depending on who we ask, how we ask, what we ask, where we ask, and all of those. So again, that distinction between the right way and the kind of fluid and flexible way of being in relation with others and being present to that kind of unfolding process, that is the centerpiece.
And I think asking people to hold that in mind really does create that opportunity to think about research in a different way and think about the sort of questions you're interested in a different way.
Yeah. And actually the constructionist design research framework, the first phase, it's already an invitation to take your topic and the questions you have and start adding more perspectives and start looking around to see what are the other points of views and ways of thinking about this topic in order to rethink about your research question. So actually from this framework, you don't start with the research question, but you start by appreciating and understanding better your topic, your context, your people, and then you're gonna go to the second phase to frame and reframe and rethink this research question. And then you have the compass for your research to go, but you don't start immediately with your hypothesis, assumptions, but you have a topic, you have an interest, but you need to expand the understanding in order to be also aligned and connected to what is really urgent or demanding from your own environment.
Right. On that point, should we actually look at the framework?
Yeah. So this first phase I was talking about, which is collaborative co-creation. So this is the phase in which you're gonna go and understand the topic. Could be doing a literature review. It could be asking the experts on the field, but also talking to your participants and see what is the matter for them. How do they see the questions and the topic you are working with? And when you get all these different perspectives, you start mapping them together.
I just wanted to add that as you enter into the field and start talking with the co-participants or the people who are part of this, it's not as if there will be one way of understanding the issue or the topic, that you're gathering multiple perspectives and realizing there isn't just, if you're defining a problem, the problem may be defined differently by many different people. So, and it's not about finding which is right and which is wrong, but finding a way for all of those to coexist.
I think in particular, it enables the possibility of people coming to the enterprise with different purposes in mind.
Right.
So, and finding ways to appreciate those different purposes and actually connect them together rather than having to say, no, sorry, this is the question.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I know in reading the book, I found this strong emphasis on the collaborative co-creation really exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we talk at the book how we are taking co-creation as a concept. So co-creation for us is humans are relational beings, so they're relational by nature. However, the concept can also become a practice. So it can be this creative process that you design and facilitate. And that's how we have some design thinking tools. Design thinking discipline offers so many creative tools that can enable you to do this co-creation and this collaborative processes with people.
And I think in particular, because this emphasis is on appreciating and connecting, as you then begin to think about, well, where do we move from there? That the idea you have of generative research questions rather than the narrow research questions you normally see people being forced down a path to do, really just opened up a whole range of ideas for me. And actually, I felt in discussing this with other people, they were kind of excited by the idea of a generative approach to research questions.
Yeah, in the book we talk about one example, how do you take an issue, a topic, and not just accept the frame within which it's given to you by perhaps the community you're working in or what have you, but you try to reframe it in multiple ways. And the example we give is doing research about food waste and reframing that as food sharing. How do you explore how people share food? So in many ways, from production to distribution to community meals and so forth, that shifts the research question in a more appreciative, affirmative way. It's still addressing food waste, but it's an enlivening kind of research question. How do we explore how people share food, and allows for new, as we said before, forming the future, for new ways of making meaning out of food production, for example.
What it struck me that in that particular example, in reading it, you're moving from a whole group of different perspectives to then actually helping people to move to a higher or a more incorporated perspective, which actually generates new thinking. And that was the process that you were talking about, really encouraged that. So you're not asking people to give up their position, but you're asking them to think about it differently and begin to move towards finding ways to get that higher perspective.
Yeah, yeah. And that's also something that's quite different from conventional research, which asks the researcher to be neutral, objective, linear. And we want to invite the practitioners, the researchers, to experiment, to be messy, you know, to really expand. And by using the design thinking tools, you can kind of systematize and structure, but to really put out there all these complexities and contradictions. And from there, you can create something more meaningful and yeah, to form a more desirable future by connecting in a more appreciative way as well.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
the idea of a messy approach and actually welcoming messy questions even.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you think about how can we reframe this, and then you can also ask the question, if we reframe this issue in this way, what opportunities emerge from that? So again, you're looking at like the possibility rather than the constraint. And then, you know, if we investigate in this direction, looking at possibilities and opportunities, you know, what else opens up in terms of how we go forward around this topic that the community is concerned with. So it really is, it's not ignoring. I mean, one of the things that people often critique a more appreciative approach with is if it ignores the problem. And the point here is this is not ignoring the problem. It's taking, you know, whatever, use the example of food waste, but it's shifting it so that we're opening possibilities rather than, you know, just mired in problem talk.
Yeah, that whole process of reframing was very interesting because it as you say, it didn't ignore the problems, but it actually helped people to look at them in a different way and reframe them so that possibilities opened up. Yes.
Right, right.
Moving on from that kind of generative research questions to actually the process you actually are then beginning to develop in terms of data generation, data meaning. I think the emphasis on meaning making was the critical one. Perhaps you can talk a bit more about how that happens moving from the generative research question to the next phase.
Yeah, so when you design your generative research question, you kind of create a productive container in which you start seeing the direction you have to go, and then that's when you prepare for the data generation and data meaning making. And I would say there's quite a big difference here from collecting data and generating data. So the process of entering an organization, a community, and talking to people and inviting them to engage in conversations, you are generating new possibilities of meanings. You are generating reflections. So you generate data and you make sense of this data. And at the same time, you start to imagine and to design what we call prototypes, which is which could be a call for action. So you start imagining and seeing the topic getting a frame, a possibility of being created. And yeah, Sheila, would you like to add something here?
Just, yeah, the idea of creating these prototypes is that, you know, you have, okay, what if we move this way? What if we move forward that way? And you can try it in these small ways And rather than investing, say you have a community or an organization that decides, this is the meaning of this and here's what we're going to implement now, and you invest a lot of money. With a prototype, you're not investing, you're trying things out in this experimental way, and you can toss out a prototype that doesn't seem to resonate with where you're going, and or what's going to resolve the issue at hand. And so this also, the idea from a constructionist point of view of data generation is really important to me, because it's not like the data is just there and you ask the right questions and so there it is, it emerged as the fact. We are creating it, and we can engage in this third phase with the community and the participants about creating stories about what this means. And there will be multiple stories, and those multiple stories will lead to different forms of action to emerge. So it's a very different twist on what we do with data and what data is.
Yeah. That process of allowing different ideas and possibilities to emerge, I thought was really kind of clear in terms of where you presented it, and also the kind of the notion of unfolding new worlds as opposed to simply looking at what's there.
Yeah, and I would say this brings the methodology of the design discipline. So design thinking borrows the traditional design discipline, which usually in their methodology, they involve people from the beginning, right? When they are designing stuff, you don't design a table or a chair without knowing to whom you are designing, without asking your customer, what kind of desk you need for. Is this for the office? Is this for your dining environment? And traditionally, as research usually conceptualize, understand, make it, and sell it. And in design, you have this cycle of including participants, collaborating with them, designing a prototype, testing with them, and just when you know it fits your context, then you expand in the implementation.
Yeah. I was intrigued by the notion of including concepts from design, because certainly I've done work in the construction industry, and the kind of difference between those who sit with clients and really try to understand what makes sense for the clients, as opposed to those who've got a book of patterns and basically want you to choose a pattern.
Yeah, I was thinking the same.
Of really getting to the sense of the client and actually the context in which they need to make this work.
Right, right. You wouldn't have someone build your house. Well, some people would. They would just buy a house that's already built. But most people, if you want to remodel your kitchen or your bathroom, the designer gets to know you and know your needs and how you move around. And then there's a prototype. What about this design? Oh no, that's not going to work. And so this is exactly what we're talking about here. Yeah.
I wonder if you can talk a bit about how moving into the forming the futures, the sort of experiments we're talking about.
Yeah. So as we transition from the third phase to the fourth phase, it's also important to say that we are looking at the researchers as changing makers. So researchers are an agent of change, in the sense that if we are creating knowledge together, the invitations and the prototypes that the researcher is making is actively also affecting the system and creating this future. So it's very important that the researcher practitioner is very attentive to the kind of invitation they are making, and also understanding that any approach is provoking a certain way of moving, of thinking. So in this process of prototyping and testing it, it's quite important to see this. How can you prepare an invitation for your participants to experiment together and to be able to give you the right feedback to expand and to implement and then to form these new futures that we are talking about?
In addition, I think that process in this last phase again underscores this notion that there is never one right way forward, that, you know, there are multiple ways forward. And if we go this way, here are some benefits and here are maybe some detriments. And if we go this way, the same. And so it loosens our grip on this very traditional idea that research is going to solve all the problems of the world. I mean, it doesn't, but we can use research to create more livable and engaging futures. And that's what this framework allows.
Yeah. And
I
you
think
pay a
also,
high,
sorry, after you, Celiane.
yeah, you pay a high attention at these very fundamental principles of design thinking, which is human-centered and context-related. And we even are saying now, not just human-centered, but life-centered. So you pay attention not just at the humans, but also non-humans and nature. So the whole system in which you are playing with and experiment with, you should take into account and be aligned and co-create together.
And I think because there's such an emphasis on appreciating the position of others and the process of collaboration, that when you get to this point of kind of experimenting, you can enable people to loosen up their perspective and actually take on board other ideas, because you've created an environment in which that is the sense that people have. Yeah, we're in this together.
Yeah, no, that is so important, David. You hit the nail on the head, you know, that think about a traditional research situation where the researcher is sort of the all-knowing expert and walks in and just, you know, conducts, you know, hands out surveys, does interviews, what have you. But here, from the very beginning of collaboration and co-creation, you're creating this sense of community where early on, differences of opinion, different points of view are exposed, but they're not judged. And so slowly you have developed this notion of community where by the end of the process, people can accept differences. They may not all be on the same page, have the same values, but together they have created this, or they've made a decision to move forward in this way. And that is so different than traditional research.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm very glad you are mentioning that, David, because this is crucial. And the whole point of designing a participatory, collaborative, co-creative research is that the process of doing research is already a process to create this engagement, this safe space. As you get into the final phase, this research is not about you anymore. The whole community is involved. They believe in it. They want to make it happen. So it is part of the process to get everyone on board.
They own it. Yeah.
And I think that's such an important reason why this is just so valuable for practitioners who are interested in research.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would like to add that I think of scholars as practitioners, and I think this form of research should take place in academia as well.
Yeah. I would love to see this more accepted in academia, I have to say. I think it'd help academics to really connect with people out there.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it's nice to have basic research, you know, where people are just in the lab, you know, generating ideas from their research. But really, the academy, in my view, should be about everyday life and making everyday life more livable. And so this kind of research makes so much more sense than adopting a model of research from science and bringing it into the field of human experience. We aren't cells and atoms and all of that. We are living, talking, thinking human beings.
Yeah, meaning-making creatures.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing that kind of struck me a lot in kind of reading this, and we've talked a bit about practitioners doing research, but it also struck me, you created a lot of questions that practitioners could use to actually think about the research they're reading and challenge some of the research they're reading, you know, to think about, well, okay, how has this researcher whose work I'm reading sought to reach out to people to get different views? In what way have they sought collaboration? Have they kind of narrowed down the questions, or have they generated new questions? So I thought it actually created a mechanism to critique research as well as actually undertake research.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I hadn't actually thought about that, but you're right. If you adopt this, if you step into this framework, it's not, again, it's not that other research is bad or wrong, but rather like, okay, if I'm doing, for example, a lit review to prepare for my research, and I, hold this other research at a higher level of value, being able to see, well, wait a minute, they didn't go into the community and capture their ideas and the way they make meaning. They didn't work with the community to generate the research, et cetera, et cetera. That's a really valuable tool to be able, and also an empowering tool for a practitioner researcher, I think.
Yeah.
That is brilliant. I've so enjoyed this conversation. I wonder if I can ask you, just as we kind of come to conclusion, any examples you have of, we've mentioned the waste one, any examples you've had of working with practitioners to actually use this framework?
Well, there are some researches I have been doing in Brazil, and we are trying to co-create a space, especially in the outskirts of Rio de Janeiro, where we have the Atlantic forest. We have communities living there, which need to make their money, but need to also protect the forest. And sometimes you have this top-down way of this top-down regulations on how people should do to protect and to live, and it might not apply to their daily lives. So we went there as researchers to meet the community, to hear how they are doing their business, and start questioning what are the dreams that they have to have more sustainable business, at the same time their dreams for the forest. And what was interesting is that we start with the farmers, and our first research was with the youth of the farms, because in this first phase of appreciating, connecting, and understanding better, we just identified together with the locals that the youth were the most urgent group to be addressed, because they are losing their culture. They try to go to the big cities, but they don't succeed. And how can you engage and inspire them to see their locality also as valuable and also as potential to stay there and to work there? So we start doing research. So the youngsters became our co-researchers. And then together we create some questions, which is what would be the future of this region and how they would like to make business there. And as we start prototyping, they just design a full, what they call the bike tour. They design a full tour around the forest in which they would like to invite guests to come to appreciate what they have, and of course to pay for it. And then slowly, this has been already 4 years, 3 years, and now they are creating their second round of business, and we are doing the second circle of the process. So it's interesting to see how we started with one idea. As we enter the field and talk to the participants, new participants join, and then the research changes, the research question change, and then we create new prototypes and can design something with them that's useful for that specific region. So the idea is to promote the sustainability of the territory, but how, we don't know until we are there talking to them and prototype with them. So the results became completely different. We wouldn't be able to imagine beforehand. So it's really merged throughout the research process.
Can I just add, Celiane,
please
that
do,
also,
Sheila, yes.
yeah, I just want to add that to me in this research, one of the things that is also so important that I want to emphasize is that the youth in this region hadn't seen a future for themselves. So it would be the end of their community, the end of all of this, because there's nothing there for them. And through this process, they created a place for themselves, a way to make a livelihood, to breathe new life into that so that next generations can continue to live in this community. And I think that's also really important.
And that is just such a beautiful example of the opposite of what often happens in these sort of projects, where the experts come in from outside and they're basically telling you, this is how you should do it, this is what you should be doing. Whereas here, you really have worked on trying to appreciate the sense of local people and how they see the future, and actually really collaborated with them to generate new ideas and new worlds, in fact.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed, Celiane and Sheila, for this. We look forward to having more conversations with people as we encourage people to use this framework, because it really is such a useful framework for practitioners thinking about doing research or critiquing the research of others. So we'll put the book up on the site as soon as we've finished. And thank you very much indeed for your participation today. It's been an absolute joy.
Thanks for this opportunity, David. It's been really lovely. Thank you.
Thank you, David. It was really great.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.